There are more seats up in front. Please feel free to come on up if you don't have a seat. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Alex Seeskin. I'm the director of the To&Through project. It's an amazing testament to all that's great about Chicago to look out and see so many familiar faces and so many hugs this morning from so many different parts of our education landscape. To have everyone come together to celebrate, to learn, to reflect on behalf of our schools and our students is amazing. In this room, we have leaders from CPS Central Office, from schools, from higher education institutions, from city colleges, community and nonprofit organizations, foundations, government, all sitting together, which underscores the collaborative spirit of our education landscape here in Chicago. I also want to welcome the people who are watching the live stream around Chicago, but also around the country today. On behalf of the University of Chicago, the Urban Education Institute, the U Chicago Consortium, and the Network for College Success, welcome to this year's To&Through project convening. I also want to take a minute to thank the funders who have made the To&Through project and this event possible. In particular, I want to be sure to acknowledge the Salzance Charitable Foundation, the Kirsten Fund for Urban Education, and the Crown family for their generous support of today's convening. Unfortunately, as I think many of you know, Tony Breik, who was originally scheduled to give this morning's keynote, came down sick earlier this week and sends his deepest regrets about not being able to attend. But I want to thank John King, who should be here shortly, for agreeing to move his lunch keynote to this morning and to still facilitate our panel of CPS students and alumni over lunch. We're also incredibly grateful to have Dr. Janice Jackson here with us today. And Chief Latanya McDade. Dr. Jackson will be giving the response later in this morning to the district attainment trends. Finally, I want to welcome our Mayor, Rahm Emanuel, and thank him for his support of the To&Through project and for kicking off this convening. Mr. Mayor, Dr. Jackson told me that you should be sure to take all of the research you see in front of you with you, because she's going to be quizzing you at your next check-in with her next week. So just want to make sure you study up. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being here today and for saying a few words.
Thanks, Alex. And I do want to note, if I can, I'll take a lot of take-home exams from people. Janice, I want to give her a take-home exam if that's okay, but she's unbelievable. Second is I want to start off and say thank you to all of you for your commitment to the children of the city of Chicago and what you do every day for helping make us better so we can do a better job for the children and the future of this city. I want to start by two other points. One, I don't know about you, but fall hit like a thud, and I'm a little cold right now. Second, I do want to compliment Latanya because she ran in the Chicago Marathon and she finished, and I just want to note, I told her I was following her and I was tweeting all day Sunday, and I said to her, I was going to embarrass her when I did it, so I pulled it off. But she did a great job, and I'm impressed with everything she's doing, plus being, working for the students of the city of Chicago, her family, but then finding the time to also train all the time for the marathon. So congratulations, Latanya. I do want to, if you haven't seen it today, I want to just point to what this is all about. Today there was a story in the Tribune about UIC bucking the trends on universities and actually more and more students. But I'll draw you to one piece in it, and that's the chancellor. And this is now my reading as if I'm doing my Torah portion at my bar mitzvah. Obviously, some of you understand the Torah portion of the bar mitzvah. All I need now is light or eyes. A big reason for UIC's surge has been the deepest pool of local students, the chancellor said. 43% of UIC's incoming freshmen matriculated from Chicago public schools, which Emeritus said is producing more and better qualified students. The district graduated 18,446 students in 2011 and climbing to over 20,717 in 2018. The 5-year graduation rate climbed from 56.9 to 78.2. Quote, as CPS becomes better and they show improvement, that affects our pipeline and makes it bigger and better, Emeritus said. Overall, nearly 60% of the students come from the Cook County, and more than 3/4 come from Cook and the surrounding counties, according to the university data. And when you put it all together, when you look at what's going on at every other public university in the state, the UIC's bucking the trend because of what's happening here at CPS. And that, I think, puts all this research and this data that I obviously will be tested on next week by Janice in perspective. If I could, though, and there'll be plenty of time for people to talk about the data and go through it, I would like to actually just put a little wrapping around this and focus on what we have tried over the last 7.5 years, not in school, but out of school. Because 80% of a child's day and time and life is spent out of the classroom. Today, we used to have 14,500 kids in summer jobs. In the city of Chicago, last year we hit a record 33,000 children. We used to have 75,000 kids in after-school activities. Today, 150,000 kids in after-school activities. We used to have 0 mentors. Today, 8,500, 0 children with mentors in public schools. Today, 8,500 kids, young men, now 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, consecutively 4 years, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, will get a mentor. Today we have universal, I see that, AJ, right there from BAM, Becoming a Man program, which is leading the effort, and WOW in our cities. From 32,000 to 86,000 kids are on a safe passage route in our public schools and on their way to school. 55,000 children get free eye exam and free eye care in our public schools. And 185,000 tutoring sessions in our public library. Every neighborhood library between 3 and 6 has a teacher for homework help. And in the end of the day, when you take all that back, summer job, after school activity, safe passage route, free eye care and eye exams, tutoring, we are providing for the parents and the children. So parents do not have to choose between being a good parent and a good employee. They can do both and do it real well. Every one of us in this room, our child needs a little help on math or reading, we can figure it out. Today, the Chicago Public Libraries make sure that every child gets that, not just some children. Every one of us, I'm a byproduct, I used to dance ballet. You want an after-school activity, athletic, artistic, academic, with 150,000 kids, nearly a full 45% of the Chicago public students are in some after-school activity. 33,000 jobs in the summer. Who here hasn't provided for their child the opportunity of a career-building experience and all the values that come with work? I could go on, but the opportunities for our kids to succeed in school was because we were willing to invest in their time out of school. And that meant that all our kids were getting the support, not just for 8 hours a day or 7.5, which used to be 5.5 hours a day. The shortest school day in the shortest school year in the United States of America. And we boosted that time. We boosted full-day kindergarten for every child. We now are embarking on full-day pre-K for every child. And we also now have the only city in the United States of America, if you get a B average, community college is free in the city of Chicago, and it's the only scholarship open to a dreamer in the United States of America, publicly funded. Now, I will give you the take-home exam if you can remember all those data points about how many kids. But I say that by way of thinking back about what has happened. A lot of time is focused appropriately in school. What we have tried to do through the public budget, separate from CPS, is that ensure that our children and our students, and most importantly, the future of this city, was receiving the support they need to succeed in school by what happens after school, in the summer. Just because a bell goes off doesn't mean our moral responsibility to our children ends. And while we're not all the way where we need to be, in a time of fiscal restraint, every year we've added resources to after school, summer jobs, mentoring, safe passage routes, and helping and ensuring that our kids receive the support they need, and our parents know that their children are not only getting that support, they don't have to make a false choice between work and family life and the future of their children. And that work together with your guidance and the rigor that Janice and LaTanya and all the principals and teachers throughout the city has meant that more and more research from Stanford, University of Chicago, and UIC is showing that our students are starting to do things right and actually on their way to a better and brighter future, and that is in college. We live in a period of time where you earn what you learn. It used to be high school could cut it. That's no longer, which is why it's so important. 68% of our kids today are on their way to college. And starting in 2019, as they graduate, we want to ensure every child has a post-high school education plan. Whether it's high school, whether it's college, community college, a trade school, a job, armed forces, they have a plan. And if they have a plan, they're more likely to execute on that plan. And that ensures that no zip code will ever define the future of our children. To all of us who took what William Bennett said 30 years ago, that Chicago public schools were the worst in the United States. If you could get through TSA, get a flight out here, we got something to show you and you got something to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today we're here to celebrate the amazing improvement that Mayor Emanuel talked about in high school and college attainment that we've seen here in Chicago over the past decade, and to talk about how we can continue and even accelerate that improvement over the next decade. We're focused on college education because we know it matters. We know that a 2 or a 4-year college education has become essential for students' successful transition to the knowledge economy. Of the more than 10 million jobs that have been added in the Great Recession, since the Great Recession economy, 99% across the country have gone to workers with at least some college education. We also know that more than 3/4 of CPS 9th graders tell us they want to earn at least a 2-year education. And finally, we know from the best social science research that a college education is associated with healthier, wealthier, and happier adults. Therefore, the objective of the To&Through project is to make Chicago the attainment city, a place where every 9th grader who aspires to earn a college degree has the opportunity and support to do so. This effort is collective, and we're lucky in Chicago to have the most vibrant education ecosystem in the country. We have talented and innovative high school and college educators, committed families and communities, strategic civic leaders, and collaborative nonprofit partners. The To&Through project seeks to accelerate the work of these stakeholders by constructing a shared web of research, data, and professional learning. Research that illuminates what matters most for students' high school and college success, data that guides efforts to improve student attainment of the key milestones, and professional learning that translates research and data into improved practice. As part of this cycle today, we are releasing 3 new research reports, copies of which you have at your table. The first is our annual analysis of the educational attainment of Chicago public school students, which Deputy Director Jenny Nagaoka will describe in a few moments. The second, we're calling Hidden Risk, which looks at how CPS students' GPAs decline between 8th and 9th grades. We find that failure in a non-core course during freshman year is equally as detrimental as failure in a core course to students' likelihood of graduating from high school. And GPA declines in arts and PE for our young Black and Latino men fall significantly during the transition. Simply put, we need to pay attention to all classes for all students, particularly during freshman year. Finally, the consortium, the Network for College Success, and the To&Through Project are releasing practice-driven data, a report that for the first time codifies the key lessons from the University of Chicago's approach to using education data for school and district improvement. We've incorporated research from these and other reports on educational attainment into Mythbusters cards that you have at your tables. These are sort of on rings. On each card are common myths about what it takes to move more students to and through high school and college. And on the other side are facts that we've drawn from our research at the University of Chicago Consortium. We're also really excited today to announce a new data partnership between the City Colleges of Chicago and the UChicago Consortium. This partnership will look very similar to the partnership the consortium has with CPS, which has yielded groundbreaking research on attainment for over 25 years. More to come in the next year on this new exciting partnership. As many of you may know, the centerpiece of our data work is the To&Through online tool, which provides data, public data, on how Chicago students move through key attainment milestones, and has quickly become the go-to source for educational attainment data in Chicago. As an example, on the tool, you can see at the district or school level how many young Latino women are on track, or how many graduates with a 3.0 GPA enrolled in a 2-year or a 4-year college. Last week, we received our annual data transfer from CPS, and in the next month, we'll be updating the tool with data from last school year. For the 3rd year in a row, we're releasing a new set of data insights, which you have in your folders. These distill our research findings from the consortium and data from the online tool into sticky insights that are easy to remember and easy to share. And these data insights are the basis for school posters that you saw as you walked in today, which we'll be printing and distributing to all CPS high schools and are also available for download. The To&Through Project's professional learning work is led by the Network for College Success, which brings together 100 CPS high school leadership teams 3 times a year for To&Through high school institutes. At these institutes, CPS high school leadership teams hear about the latest research, look at end-of-quarter data on freshman success, and share innovative practices across schools. And over the past few years, the Network for College Success has released Freshmen on Track and Post-Secondary Toolkits. These toolkits bring together resources from the network's partner schools for everyone to use, with sections that address everything from understanding research and data, to working as effective teams, to talking to students about GPA and college affordability. We also have a communications toolkit from the Urban Education Institute with resources to support school leaders and school partners in their efforts to share research and data with educators, students, and families. And now I'm pleased to welcome to the stage Jenny Nagaoka, the Deputy Director of the University of Chicago Consortium, to walk us through the data from the educational attainment of Chicago public school students.
So thank you, Alex, and thanks to all of you for coming out today. Being able to present on the educational attainment of Chicago public school students is really like one of my favorite times of the year because maybe I'm probably a data geek, but I think it really gives us a chance to take a step back, think about the progress we've made, and try to identify what the challenges are ahead. I'm going to reference the headline that the mayor also mentioned 30 years ago when Secretary of Education William Bennett referred to the Chicago public schools as the worst in the nation. But I want to kind of tell this from like my personal perspective and how this sort of affected me. Because when this headline came out, I was a senior in high school at Lane Tech. And I was about to go out to college. I went to college at McAllister College, a small liberal arts school in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I took this headline with me. When I got there, I really wondered if I was smart enough. I wondered if the quality of education that I received was as good as my classmates. I wondered if people looked at me and thought that I really did not belong there. And so this really, I think a lot about this headline, and I think a lot about where we are today and how proud I am about all the progress that has happened. And so much has changed, right? I mean, it's really amazing. I'm thinking actually about how much has changed even in the year that I stood on the stage, because, I think we've made a lot of progress in terms of the numbers, but I think one of the most exciting things and remarkable things that has happened is how much national attention is being paid to Chicago. People have been really, whether it's reporters, researchers, writers, other districts are really looking to Chicago as a model and are noticing the progress that we have made. And this is important because what it means for the future of children in Chicago. But I also think a lot about the Chicago public school graduates who are starting college right now and how this changes how they might be feeling about themselves as they are embarking on their journey into adulthood. And the progress that we've seen has a lot to do with people across the city, many of whom are in this room today. So I just want to all give yourselves a round of applause for creating these headlines. So I'm going to be talking to you about 5 milestones on the way to and through high school and to and through college. Freshmen on track, high school graduation, college enrollment, two-year college persistence in four-year colleges, and four-year college graduation. So starting with freshmen on track. This is an indicator that was developed at the consortium, I've lost track, 15 plus years ago. Many of you are familiar with the definition of it. In order to be considered on track at the end of freshman year, a student can have no more than 1 semester F in a core course and needs to have enough credits to be promoted to be a sophomore. And a student who is on track at the end of freshman year is 3 times more likely to graduate than a student who is off track. So this has been an indicator that the consortium has been paying close attention to and the district has been paying close attention to. And over the course of the past 10 plus years, we've seen tremendous progress on the freshman on track indicator. In 2003, just 64% of students were on track at the end of freshman year, compared to 89% for freshmen in 2017. We've also seen tremendous progress in high school graduation. So tracking that same class I just showed you, the graduation rates have gone from 57% to 75% in 2017. One of the other pieces that we are including in this year's attainment report is the high school graduation rates for students who completed through an options program. We wanted to pay attention to this because it's one of the strategies that CPS has been using more and more to make sure that more students can receive a high school diploma, understanding that the needs of students may differ and that these options programs provide an alternative way for them to receive a diploma. And now 4% of students who start in CPS are receiving a high school diploma through an options program, so that the overall rate is at 79%. We've also seen really big improvements in college enrollment. Since 2006, the college enrollment rate has gone from 33% to where it now is at 47%. We've also seen some increases in college enrollment in two-year colleges as well, which have gone from 16% to 19%. So overall, when we think about what this means in terms of the rate of students going on to college, in 2006, fewer than half of students made an immediate transition to college, compared to about 2/3 of students for the class of 2016. We also have been paying attention to two-year persistence in four-year colleges. This is a place where we need to be paying close attention to, like, what is happening to students after they enroll to college? How does this make us think about college choice? How does this think about what higher ed can be doing to better support students? So when we look at this, we see that for the class of 2006, 66% of them were in college or in a four-year college 2 years later. And just 60% of students who made that immediate transition are there 2 years later for the class of 2016. I also wanted to talk about four-year college completion. So what we see here is that for the class of 2006, 49% of them enrolled, 49% of them had completed a four-year college 6 years later. That rate has been largely flat over time. The thing we always need to be paying attention to here is that there's a lot more students who are making that immediate transition to a four-year college now compared to 5 years ago. We also, some other students, there are a lot of different paths that students take to a four-year degree. Some students will, right after high school, enroll in a two-year college. Of those students, roughly over time, 8% of them are getting a four-year college degree. And then for students who don't make that immediate transition, there's like a handful of them, about 2% over time, who are completing a four-year college degree. So we're actually seeing there's a lot of different paths that students are taking. The exciting news is that we're seeing more and more students making that immediate transition into college. So another thing that we like to do to sort of think about what does this mean for today's freshmen going forward. So if the rates of high school graduation, college enrollment, and college completion continue going forward for today's freshmen, we would expect that 17% of those who make an immediate transition to a four-year college will have a bachelor's degree 10 years from now. But overall, that rate is 19%. And we can think back to the other headline that we know about. The number that was reported there was 6%. And so a lot has changed over time. We've seen tremendous progress in the college completion for Chicago public school graduates. You know, in fact, I've given you a lot of rates. Rates are sort of hard to think about in terms of people. And so I want to end by showing you what this means in terms of the numbers of students who are enrolling in a four-year college and the number of students who are completing a four-year college degree. So if you go back to the graduating class of 2006, about 2,500 students made an immediate transition to a four-year college. 5,300 made an immediate transition to a four-year college. And of those students, about 2,500 have a four-year college degree. This is compared to the class of 2010, where about 6,900 students made an immediate transition to a four-year college, and then about 3,400 have a bachelor's degree. So we've actually seen in the span of about 5 years, there are almost 1,000 more students coming out of the Chicago Public Schools who have a college degree, which makes a real difference in their lives, and it also makes a huge difference in the future of our city. There's a lot of hope too for the future, because we see that the number of students who are making that immediate transition has gone up by about 4,000 students. So we expect more and more students, if the present rates continue, to be having bachelor's degrees. So a lot has changed over the past 10 years. A lot has changed in the 30 years, but I think a lot of this has happened in the past 10 years. So from here, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Janice Jackson, Chief Executive Officer of the Chicago Public Schools, who will provide a district response. I have to say nice words about Dr. Jackson first. So she'll be providing the district response to the attainment rates I just shared. So I told my story about being a Chicago Public School graduate, but Dr. Jackson also has a long history with CPS. She was a CPS student from Head Start through high school. She began her teaching career at Chicago's South Shore High School, and later became a principal, a network chief, the district's chief executive officer. And we're tremendously grateful to Dr. Jackson and her team for the partnership over the years. The research practice partnership between the Chicago Public Schools and the Youth Chicago Consortium began in 1990, and it's really become a model for districts across the country: Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. And the district's commitment to this partnership has enabled the consortium to study the Chicago Public Schools reforms efforts and really identify what matters most for student success, and contribute to our collective effort to improve the educational attainment of CPS students and graduates. And with that, I welcome Dr. Jackson, and thank you for your partnership, and thank you for speaking today.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. I also would like to just thank University of Chicago at large, and specifically the Consortium for Chicago School Research and the To&Through Project for the data that you saw today, but more importantly, the amazing partnership that Jenny just talked about between the institution and Chicago Public Schools. I'm going to take a page from Jenny's presentation. I so appreciated your personal story around this work, and I just wanted to share one that I think really illuminates the strength of this partnership, which is, I remember being a principal at Al Raby High School at the time, and I was traveling into work, and I was at the intersection of Congress and Michigan. And this was back when they were still selling newspapers like that. No, I'm sorry, newspaper people. The guy was out there, and he was holding up the today's paper, and it was the potholes report. And there's so many things that I can point to that are pivotal in my development as a leader and things that motivate me. But as a high school principal, I can't think of a single piece of research that lit a fire underneath me as a leader. And the work that you've done and continue to do has led to cultural change in our schools, and that's something that you should be commended for. I can also say, as a person, I like to think I'm a little bit of a researcher, not for real, but I did some. But I know a little bit about the relationship between researchers and practitioners, and it's often the case that researchers think we've done all this great work, we know all these things, and why won't they just do what the research tells them to do? And practitioners, we always think that they are sitting in an ivory tower drinking coffee or tea now, and if they had to do my job, they'd be singing a different tune. But that is not the case in Chicago Public Schools. Gone are the days where we get those reports and we kind of talk about them for a day and we chuck them away. If you look at the work and the strategy for improving Chicago Public Schools, you see the research that has come out of the University of Chicago, and more specifically the consortium. I talked to other superintendents, and I can't tell you how surprised many of them are of the data sharing agreement and just the trust that has been built between these two institutions. But I really think when school systems are serious about improvement, they're not afraid to have an external partner that will serve as a mirror, if you will, into the work that you're doing. And because of that, we have seen remarkable progress in the district, which I won't highlight all of those things. But I think in addition to the number of students actually attending college and also completing college, as the presentation pointed out, there are also a few other things that I think are critically important to point out. Because it's not enough just to get students to graduate and help them transition into college. We know for many of our scholars, there are financial issues that get in the way and prevent them from being successful, which is why the school system has also spent as much time preparing students and helping them secure scholarship dollars in order for them to be successful. Last year, CPS posted $1.3 billion in scholarships for the class of 2018. We can, yeah, you should clap for them. We've continued to invest in dual credit and dual enrollment and other early college programs such as AP and IB, because we know that it's not only about the credentials and getting in. Our students need the confidence, and early college exposure gives them the confidence to know that they do belong there. They're just as smart as everyone else there, and more importantly, they're prepared. So since the day that I became a teacher, I've been committed to improving equity for all of our students. And as I look at the data today, I think equity and transparency are probably the two biggest things that jump out to me and really frame CPS's reaction to the data. First and foremost, as a school system, we must narrow the achievement gap, and we've been talking about that in a much stronger way, in a much more intentional way throughout the district. We also recently established an Office of Equity, which is going to be led by Maurice Sweeney, who's here with us today. Yes. Maurice is the former principal of Tilden, but more importantly, a former NCS principal. So he is, he gets it. He understands this work, and he's grounded in the research, so we're really excited about that. And in addition to, there are a myriad of things he's going to focus on in his role, but improving the achievement amongst African American and Latino students is his primary focus, and you'll be hearing more about that today. I was also going to say, if anybody's wondering how we narrow the achievement gap, Maurice is going to single-handedly do it. So that's what I've been telling him, so no pressure, Maurice. But seriously, as we think about equity, it's not just enough to make folks more aware of the issues, which obviously is the first case, but we also have to start changing practice. So we appreciate this research. We appreciate the guidance that's provided in the documents that Jenny showcased earlier, and hopefully it gives us and our leaders in the room and in the district the tools that they need in order to change the culture in their schools, which is going to lead to a narrowing of the gap. In addition to that, we believe empowering educators and communities and being more transparent is also a key to seeing some improvements in the data. And one of the things that I'm excited to talk about is this year our approach to investing in academic programming in our schools. We know that there are proven programs such as STEM and IB that have led to remarkable improvements in graduation, GPAs, but more importantly, college completion. And instead of us making those decisions in isolation down in central office, we have embarked on an initiative where we will be going out into the communities and empowering community members to help us make decisions about the type of academic programming that will not only improve outcomes for students, but also revitalize the schools within our communities that are in desperate need of a jolt. In my opinion, I think that these efforts are groundbreaking, but I want to be clear that this is just a start to what I believe will be years and years of hard work in order to continue on this path towards success in CPS. I also think it's really important that we continue to explore diverse post-secondary options, which is why Chicago Public Schools a couple of years ago announced Learn, Plan, Succeed, which the mayor referenced, which is really our commitment to make sure that every single child in Chicago Public Schools has what I think every person in this room had and what we expect for our children, which is a plan after high school. I remember when we first made this announcement, a reporter asked me, doesn't this seem like you're pushing middle class values on the families in Chicago? And I had to go look up middle class values because I didn't know what that meant. But when I finally figured out what I was being asked, seriously, I said that's exactly what we should be doing. There shouldn't be a different set of values for students based on where they live or the color of their skin. So part of that is really recognizing that there are multiple pathways. The data outlined in the presentation today shows that there are many different ways for students to be successful and attain higher education after graduation from high school. And so we'll be using this data to continue to inform and refine our plans for Learn, Plan, Succeed, and making sure that we're giving students credit for the multiple pathways that they're taking after high school. I can say that in all my years in Chicago Public Schools, from Head Start all the way to this role now as CEO, I've never been more proud to be a part of Chicago Public Schools. In addition to the progress that we've made, in some cases incremental, in many cases exponential, I think that Chicago stands as a model. If you look nationally, for example, at college enrollment rates and graduation rates, while they're making incremental progress, we're really doubling and tripling in some cases CPS's stance, and I think that that is something that should be encouraging to all and making sure that our educators and our students feel really proud of the work that's happening. But I won't be satisfied until every single student in every single community from Rogers Park to the Indiana border feels that they are receiving a high quality education and are prepared for life after high school. I think that it's important to acknowledge the I won't say ecosystem because Chuck is going to kill me. I want to acknowledge the exoskeleton system. For the science people, you know what that means. But what we have here in Chicago is truly remarkable. All of the partners that are here in this room, you really do make up a rich group of folks that have led to the progress that we see here today. Our teachers are on the front lines. They're working extremely hard. Our counselors and principals are doing great work in order for students to realize their dreams post-high school. But this would not be possible if we did not have all of the stakeholders at the table working collaboratively on behalf of our students. So I just want to thank you for your commitment and your commitment to Chicago Public Schools. I want to thank you for your belief in our children and our leaders and their ability to strive and do great things. And I just want to remind you that we can't do this alone. And as we look at some of the next edges of growth and some of the data that was not so positive that was pointed out today, we're going to be looking for your support in order to help us get to the next level. So thank you, consortium. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to the data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. Good morning, everybody. I'm noticing all the folks at the back. If people have a seat at their table, could you just put up a finger with how many seats? And you guys, please join us if you would like to. I'm Sarah Duncan. It's fine to move while I talk. I'm Sarah Duncan, the co-executive director of the Network for College Success, and I'm so pleased to be here today and to have all of you here with us to celebrate truly remarkable progress in our city that everyone here has had a hand in making happen. I want to thank Dr. Jackson and our mayor and Jenny and Alex for their remarks and the updates. I want to sort of echo both Janice and Jenny. When you see the numbers, even the number of kids, like, take a second and think of a kid. It's a lot more kids, and the difference it makes in their lives and also their families and communities is really important. So we are thrilled and honored to host today's convening. So happy to have you with us. And what we do at the Network for College Success is trying to help people on the ground translate the numbers and the research and the data into changed practice that pushes student outcomes to the next level. So like our operating question is, now that we know this from the consortium, from To&Through Project, what do we do now? And you'll hear some of that in the breakouts today, and we're just so pleased to be a part of that cycle of research data and change practice. And with that, I'm so honored to welcome and introduce our keynote speaker, John King. John brings an incredibly important and unique vantage point to today's convening, having worked at nearly every level of our education system, similar to Janice, actually. At the high school social studies teacher, social studies teachers are always the troublemakers, right? At the school level as a principal, at the state level as New York Secretary of Education Commissioner, and at the federal level as the U.S. Secretary of Education in the Obama administration. And prior to that, as the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Education, overseeing policies and programs focused on pre-K through 12th grade education, English learners, special ed, and innovation. So Maurice, that should make you feel better about your job. John is now serving as president and CEO of the Education Trust. And if you don't know about the Education Trust, you have to look it up right now. A national nonprofit organization focused on identifying and closing opportunity and achievement gaps. Please join me in welcoming John King. We're deeply grateful to you for lending your voice and expertise to today's event.
Good morning, everybody. So thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. Thank you to Alex and the Institute staff for the opportunity to join all of you this morning. You know, every morning I'm looking for an antidote to the times. You know what I mean? You wake up in the morning, you look at the alerts on your phone, and you're already depressed, and you haven't gotten out of bed. And then maybe you make the mistake, as I sometimes do, of turning on cable news. Then you get really depressed about, the bitter partisanship that we see, about the language of hate that has become normalized in our culture, about the babies, the immigrant babies who are being ripped from their mother's arms, folks who are facing police being called on them for taking a nap in their dorm because of race, right? That's every morning we are confronted with that. So every morning I'm looking for what is the antidote, and I want to say, hearing from the mayor and from Janice and hearing the progress in Chicago this morning, that is the antidote. So thank you for that. So I'm inspired. I'm inspired by the work that's happening in Chicago. I'm inspired by the progress on Freshmen on Track, the progress on high school graduation, and the important progress on college enrollment. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And as you heard throughout the morning from the mayor, from Jenny, from Janice, it wasn't certain that it would be that way. Right? There was this low moment when Secretary Bennett talked about the state of Chicago public schools, and it's because of this community, this exoskeleton, as Chuck says, because of this community bringing together philanthropy and higher education and researchers and educators and parents and community-based organizations. It's because of that exoskeleton that progress was possible. But one of the most inspiring things about being in a room like this is that no one is satisfied that it's good enough. Right? In too many places around the country, marginal incremental progress is celebrated, like folks won the World Series, right? Because they did a little bit better. But here, there is this sense of urgency that better is good but not good enough, and that there's work to do to continue to improve. And that's really where I want to focus our conversation today, on the notion that the progress made towards equity goals is important, and there's now this opportunity to build on that progress. And to build on that progress, we have to look both at the high school side of the equation, the K-12 side of the equation, and at the higher education side of the equation. And I want to talk about both from the framework of what do our students need. Because from my perspective, that is ultimately the education equity question. Right? What do students need? And I'm interested in equity, not just equality. Right? Equality is giving everybody the same thing. Equity is giving everybody what they need to thrive. Right? And this is a community that understands that equality, just giving everyone the same, is not good enough. We've got to aim for equity. We've got to ask, what will it take to help all of our students, including our most vulnerable? Our low-income students, our students of color, our English learners, our students with disabilities, our kids who are in foster care, our kids who are homeless, our kids who are undocumented, our kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system. What will it take to help every single one of them achieve the goal of post-secondary success? And so that's where I want to focus our conversation. I want to start by sharing a little bit from a personal perspective of what I needed. Because I'm only standing here today because of a series of amazing New York City public school teachers who gave me what I needed as a kid. I grew up in Brooklyn. Both my parents were New York City public school educators. I went to New York City public schools. And when I was in 4th grade at PS 276 in Canarsie, my mom passed away. I was 8. It's October of 4th grade. And I'm only alive today because I was in Mr. Osterweil's classroom at PS 276. And he was my teacher in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and he saved my life. His classroom was this place that was safe and supportive and nurturing when home was a struggle. And after my mom passed, I lived with my dad, who was quite sick with undiagnosed Alzheimer's. So home was this place that I didn't know what my father was going to be like from one night to the next. Some nights he was sad, some nights he was mad, some nights he would talk to me, some nights he wouldn't. But school was amazing. School was this place that was interesting and compelling. We read the New York Times every day, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I always say, Mr. Osterweill was doing college and career-ready standards before we called them college and career-ready standards. We did productions of Alice in Wonderland and Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare in elementary school. I was the Rose in Alice in Wonderland. Imagine me with big red felt petals sticking out of my head. But I remember the experiences in Mr. Osterweil's class like yesterday because that was the one place I could be a kid when I couldn't be a kid outside of school. And as my father got more and more sick and I took on more and more responsibility, I was figuring out how to get food in the house, how to pay the bills, how to just keep our household going. It was just the two of us. School took on this outsized role in my life. And I was blessed that I had Mr. Osterweill. He looped with us for 3 years. It was very unusual in New York City Public School. And then I had a series of teachers who kept me on the right track, partly because they had more hope about my life than I had for my own. Right? They imbued in me their hope for me. But after my father passed, when I was 12, I kept moving around family members and different schools. And I was angry. Like many of our kids in our schools who've experienced trauma, I was angry. I was angry about a lot of things. And I actually got kicked out of high school. I always say to folks, I'm the first U.S. Secretary of Education to have been kicked out of high school. But I truly hope that I'm not the last, because another part of my journey is that people were willing to give me second chances. They were willing to see that I was more than just my mistakes, that there was still potential, that there was a reason to invest in me. And so again, it was teachers and a counselor and some family members and some mentors who chose to invest in me despite the mistakes I've made. It would have been easy for folks to say, here's an African-American, Latino male student, family in crisis, New York City public schools. What chance does he have? It would have been easy for folks to turn their back on me, but they didn't. And for that reason, I'm standing here today. And so I want to suggest, as we think about what our young people need, I think about it very personally. Young people need academic environments that are rich, engaging, and rigorous, and they need powerful relationships with adults. And if we can deliver those things to kids, we can transform their lives. Right? We can make incredible things possible for them. And so what does that mean for your work today? Well, I want to suggest a few questions to think about through the day. As you think about how to get the through part done, because you're doing so well on the to part, right? And so we celebrate that the to part is going well, that students are getting to college. And now the question is, how do we make sure when they get there, they finish? Or when they get to meaningful post-secondary career training, that they finish and they productively enter the economy? So some questions to think about. I want to suggest 6 areas of potential focus and draw on some national examples that I think you should have in mind. One is, what does it take to create that school environment that provides the social, emotional, and academic development that students need to truly be prepared for success in college? What does that look like? And I want to suggest a lot of that is about instructional quality, and that is hard. That is hard to address. That is hard to fix. Yes, data informs that, and research informs that, but at the end of the day, we've got important capacity building work to do with our educators to make sure that class and the relationships between teachers and students are great. And one of the reasons I so admire Janice is because she wakes up every morning thinking about that, about how do we make instruction in our schools as strong as possible. There was just a report done by a group called TNTP, a professional development organization, called the Opportunity Myth. They looked at over 20,000 student assignments, samples of student work. They observed in thousands of classrooms, and the findings are truly shocking, including the finding that in classrooms where the majority of kids are kids of color, in 40% of those classrooms, kids never did grade level work. Not a little bit, never. Compared to 12% of the classrooms where the majority of students are white. Right, so that's about the content of what's happening in the classroom. Right, the work on AP and IB and dual enrollment, that is part of challenging that. But we've got to make sure it's not just the kids who are in those programs, but all kids in all high schools need to be engaged with rich, rigorous work that truly prepares them for college. That is how we ultimately begin to tackle the remediation problems that we face in so many of our campuses. But it's not just academic work. It is also building kids' socio-emotional well-being. It's imbuing in them the sense that through their hard work that they can improve, what Carol Dweck has called the growth mindset. Well, how do we do that? Well, part of how we do that is we have to tackle issues of implicit bias in classrooms. Reality is, majority of this nation's public school students are students of color, but only 18% of our teachers are teachers of color. And saying we have to talk about implicit bias isn't saying anybody's racist. It's saying we live in an American society that has 300 years of history, and that affects how all of us view each other. And so we have to tackle that. We have to make sure that teachers have the support they need to work effectively across lines of race and class and language. We also have to work hard to ensure that teachers are diverse and that young people are exposed to diverse role models. We have an emerging body of evidence that, including a very large-scale study done by Johns Hopkins in North Carolina that showed African-American male elementary school students in particular who had at least one African-American teacher in elementary school were more likely to graduate from high school. It is powerful to see someone who looks like you, who is a model of educational success and perseverance. That is important. It is also important, I would submit, for white students to see educators of color leading in their classrooms and schools. And so that's part of the work that we have to do to create the right kinds of environments in schools. We also have to be systematic about making sure that the way we approach academics builds kids' sense of perseverance, their ability to collaborate with peers. Right? That is work that happens in the classroom. A second area of focus. And the mayor and Janice both talked about students' plan for the future. And I think one of the challenges there is that the less you know about what's possible in life, the harder it is to envision that plan for yourself. And so we've got to think really hard, what does it mean to have a genuine plan for your future, a vision for what you could be? Valerie Jarrett will often say, you can't be what you can't see. Right? For students who haven't been exposed to a wide range of careers and life possibilities, it's hard for them to come up with that clear plan. So we've got to create that for students in schools. I think about the work of the Urban Alliance, which is a program that had a federal innovation grant. They do internships for students, long-term internships and one-on-one mentoring. one of the interesting things in the randomized controlled trial study of Urban Alliance is there was a 23% increase for the male students participating in the Urban Alliance program in going on to college. Very large increase, young men of color going on to college. And the reason, I would argue, is that those internship experiences help to make real the plan for the future. Right? I think about visiting the P-Tech school in Brooklyn when I was state commissioner in New York and talking with kids at the P-Tech school. That's a partnership where kids graduate with a high school diploma, associate's degree, first in line for a job at IBM. And there are lots of things that are cool about the school, the way they collaborate around the design of the curriculum and so forth. But when you sit with kids said things to me like, you know, I really want the car that my IBM mentor has. And I know if I get a job like that, I can get that kind of car, right? That's about specificity in your plan for the future, right? So that clarity, that finding that passion for every high school student, critical. Third area that I would suggest is important is not all college choices are good college choices. That's an uncomfortable thing to say in any room. But the reality is, and we did a study at EdTrust, we've done a series of studies looking at graduation rates for African American students and Latino students, looking at peer institutions, right? Because you hear in higher ed the same thing you hear in K-12, which is our graduation rate is low, but look at who our students are. I mean, it's not really our fault, right? But that's actually not true. And you can look at colleges that have demographically similar, even nearly identical populations, similar percentages of students of color, low-income students, and see very large differences in graduation rates. Right? I'll give you one local example. Again, and maybe it's uncomfortable to talk about. And look, there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of explanations about inadequate resources and the declining investment in public higher ed. And I accept all of that. But I will say, if you look at the 6-year graduation rates at Chicago State, you're talking about 15%. If you look at the same graduation rate at Winston-Salem State in North Carolina, which actually has lower average entering SAT scores, graduation rate is more like 50%. And that's not good enough. But those differences matter, and if we are not willing to have an honest conversation about those differences, we're not being honest with our kids. Because we would do it for our own kids, right? Every one of us, we'd be worried if our kids said, I'm going to go to this school, only 15% of the students graduate, it's going to be great. Right? We'd have some questions for them, and so if we'd have questions for our own kids, we have to have those same questions for other people's children. And so this question of making sure that kids are making good choices, we also know that many students, including those who are adults returning to school, choose for-profit colleges that are stealing from them. They're just a scam, a swindle, a con. Right? And we have to help students understand that, because when they watch that ad, right, on TV, they can't necessarily discern between that and what they read in a flyer from another school. So we have to help students navigate that process. The KIPP schools are doing really interesting work on this because they are trying to improve their college completion rates. Oh, nice. We have some KIPP folks in the room. And one of the things I appreciate about KIPP is they're not doing it just for their kids. KIPP has been intentional about partnering with school districts around the country to share some of their practices and systems. And so we have to engage in that work of looking at college match and strengthening college match. A fourth area that I want to talk about is advising. And this, again, goes to the stuff you do for your own kids. And advising is critically important to the work in higher education. Now, there are some great external organizations in Chicago, folks like One Goal and Bottom Line, who are doing this work. But at the end of the day, we also need higher ed institutions to step up and do this work. I think about a place like Georgia State. Georgia State is one of the institutions in the country that graduates some of the largest numbers of African American students. Georgia State has largely closed the racial gap in their college completion rates. And they will tell you they've done it through what they call intrusive advising, what I call nagging, right? And that is, you get an advisor, and the advisor calls you and says, hey, I looked at the courses you registered for. You registered for a course that's not going to help you complete your major. Let's talk about that. The advisor also calls you when you get a bad midterm grade and says, I see on my data dashboard that you did not do well in the midterm. This is exactly what I'm going to do for my daughters. I see you did not do well in the midterm. Tell me what your plan is. Are you going to office hours? Have you been to the writing center? Are you part of a study group? All right, and so they do this intrusive advising. The other thing that Georgia State has done is something called Panther grants, just-in-time emergency grants to help students with financial crises that they face. Hugely important, particularly for vulnerable students. Right? Affluent students can call home and say, hey, I need a little more for X, Y, or Z. For low-income students, we know there are students who will drop out of college because they can't pay a library fine. Right? So institutions have a responsibility to step up and provide the sort of just-in-time assistance that students need. Now, at City University of New York, they have a program called ASAP that provides good guidance around course selection, ongoing advising, just-in-time grants. CUNY ASAP, in a randomized controlled trial, has doubled completion rates for community college students who are required to take at least one remedial course. Doubled completion rates. It is doable. Now, CUNY ASAP also includes a Metro card, which in New York City is like gold. Right? And they are replicating the CUNY ASAP program now in Ohio. MDRC is doing the randomized controlled trial study. And the early indications, now in Ohio they use gas cards, not Metro cards, but the early indications are that the results are going to be very similar. Right? The right set of supports can make a huge difference. Now, I'm excited about the work that the Partnership for College Completion is doing to build a network of higher ed institutions that commit to provide these kind of supports. The key is going to be doing it for real. I visit a lot of college campuses around the country. I ask the president, what are you doing? Everything. I say, are you doing something on better pathways for students? Oh, absolutely. What about advising? Oh, yeah, we got that. And I said, well, have your graduation rates moved? Oh, well, you should see who our students are. Right? And so again, the commitment is good. The key is going to be execution. A fifth area of focus is on this issue of financial obstacles. We have to confront the reality that for many of our students, tuition assistance is simply not enough. The real cost of college includes how you're going to eat, where you're going to live, how you're going to buy the books. Right? And if we look at the real cost of college, what we know is that Pell Grants, the main federal vehicle for supporting low-income students, are at an all-time low in their purchasing power, despite increases that we worked hard to get in the Obama administration. The reality is low-income students often struggle to meet the range of financial responsibilities that they have. And it's even more challenging for those students who are parents. A quarter of America's college students are parents. And so it's even more challenging for those who have other financial responsibilities beyond just themselves. We have got to do a better job. Now, there are places that are doing interesting things. I think about the work that Sarah Goldrick-Rabb does at the Hope Center to try and lift up colleges and universities that are doing good work around food pantries in particular, so that folks have access to food. Colleges and universities that are thinking about housing subsidies to help address housing needs. There's a push now in California to expand the California version of what would be the MAP grants in Illinois to cover a larger share of the full cost of college, because we know that those financial obstacles get in the way for students. And we need philanthropy to step up on this, and we need institutions to step up on this, and ultimately we will need elected officials to increase the investment in public higher ed in particular. Right? But we've got to have a comprehensive response to the range of needs that students have. And there's somebody in this room, you didn't have a muffin yet this morning. You're having trouble staying with me. Imagine if you hadn't. And I say this quite seriously. Imagine if you had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. Would you really be able to concentrate in class? Is that a college readiness problem? Yes, it is. Right, because ready means that we have to provide students with the supports they need to be able to navigate college. All right, so I'm wrapping up, don't worry. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it feels good to the reverend, so I am. So a sixth area, this question of a post-high school plan, that is also a higher ed challenge. That too many times, just as you ask high school students, why or high school students ask themselves, sitting in class, not my class, but some classes, why am I here? What is this all for? That is also a problem on college campuses. That students don't have a clear plan for how what they're studying and the work they're doing connects with what they're going to go do. And that's one of the reasons we lose so many students, right? It's because there are lots of challenges. They've got to overcome those challenges to be in class, and if there isn't a clear connection between what's happening in the classroom, what they're doing on campus, and their future, they're going to struggle. It doesn't have to be that way. I think about a school called Lake Area Technical Institute. It's a school in South Dakota that won last year's Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. Now, in many ways, Lake Area is very different from Chicago. There are very few students of color, for example. It's in South Dakota, as I mentioned. On the other hand, Lake Area's student population is about half Pell-eligible students. So there are some real parallels. What's interesting about Lake Area is that 99% of their graduates are employed, and compared to students who did not go to Lake Area, they are earning 27% more. Right, and that's because of intentionality at Lake Area about the linkages between coursework and careers, the partnerships with employers, making sure that students have internship experiences, that students are directly connected with employers. And I know Juan Salgado is working on this issue diligently here, but I just think it's critical, particularly for our most vulnerable students, that we do a better job of providing those supports. Again, we know affluent families do it for their kids, right? When you think about affluent families, they are thinking about what's the summer job, what's the summer internship, who can I help you to network with, who can I introduce you to? Well, low-income students, first-generation students, they don't have access to that. And we've got to provide it through our institutions. So higher ed institutions have a huge responsibility to strengthen the connection between college and post-college experiences. So let me close with this, that the exoskeleton work, the coalition work, is critical, and I wish I could tell you, you get an A and you're done, but instead I'm going to say, no, you get a midterm grade of an A, there's more work to be done, and it's going to be hard work. And I want to stress two areas. One is changing higher education is hard, right? Changing P12 is hard. I think there's a good argument to be made that changing higher education is actually harder. That some of the institutional obstacles make it even harder to change. So all the groups in this room, philanthropy, business, educators, parents, community-based organizations, you all need to now redouble your efforts with a focus on continuing the progress in CPS under Janice's leadership, but then also the kind of higher ed change that is necessary to ensure that students truly get to and through. Right? And so I want to call on you to do that. The second piece, that same coalition has to come together around policy issues. Now, I know there are some people in the room who think to themselves, I don't do politics, I don't do lobbying, I don't want to go to Springfield. Right? But the truth is, public policy matters. I'll give you one example. A change that was recently made, a positive bipartisan change in the current Congress, those words are not often said in that sequence, a positive bipartisan change in the current Congress was to allow students to use Pell Grants year-round. Why is that important? Well, if students, particularly part-time students, if they stay continuously enrolled, they are dramatically more likely to complete. If they leave for a semester, for the summer semester, if they leave for that summer period, they are less likely to return. Access to Pell year-round makes a difference. Well, Illinois is one of several states that need to still adjust their state aid system to line up with the Pell Grant year-round access. That's a small policy issue, but it matters for students. I'll give you another example. Some of our students will end up in the criminal justice system for a variety of reasons, including the fact that we as a country are obsessed with incarceration as our response to nearly every problem. Substance abuse, incarceration. Mental health challenges, incarceration. Poverty, incarceration. Right? So as a result, we know there are lots of folks who are incarcerated We could help people who are incarcerated pursue higher education while incarcerated so that when they return to the community, they are better prepared to contribute to their families and to their community. Instead, in the mid-90s, Congress very unwisely banned access to Pell Grants for folks who are incarcerated. The result was programs in prisons all over the country shut down. In the Obama administration, we created a pilot program. There are 69 colleges and universities around the country using Pell Grants for folks who are incarcerated. When you sit with folks who have had the experience of higher education while in prison, they will tell you it changed their lives, not just because of the academic skills, but because of the hope that instilled in them and their families. That's a public policy question. That's a political question. That's a question of whether or not Congress, the executive, governors, legislatures do the right thing and provide aid to folks who are incarcerated. So part of what this coalition needs to do is not just the work to improve practice on the ground in higher ed institutions, but also to change the policy landscape in ways that benefit our most vulnerable students. You know, President Obama would often quote Dr. King saying that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And then he would quickly remind us all that we have to do the bending. What is inspiring about this room is you have been doing the bending. Right? You have made tremendous progress that should be celebrated. And there is more bending to do. I have a friend who makes the point that hope is work. Right? Hope is not blind, naive optimism. Hope is not wishing it were so. Hope is rolling up one's sleeves and doing the work of social change. I know this is a room that can do that. Thank you for your leadership. Thanks for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you so much. Please join me one more time in giving John King a round of applause. We are running a few minutes late. We're going to aim to start the round one breakout sessions in about 10 minutes. I'll read out room numbers for where those round one breakout sessions are happening, so take a look at your name tag. Those room numbers are also on a map that's inside your folder. Transition from 8th to 9th grade is going to be in room 404. Myths and facts about grades is going to be in room 406. And levers for improving college graduation will be in room 200. So we're going to aim to start those in about 10 minutes, and then we'll do 2 rounds of breakout sessions. We'll meet back up here for lunch, and John will facilitate a panel of students. Thank you for a great morning. Some great speeches this morning and great breakout sessions. We're going to move into everyone's favorite part of our convening, which is hearing from students, CPS students. And I want to introduce Tanika Island-Childress, who is the CEO of the University of Chicago Charter School and the acting director of the Urban Education Institute.
Hello. Thank you all. Can you hear me here? Thank you all again for joining us today. It is my pleasure and honor to be a part of this incredible community of educators and education partners in Chicago. I want to take a step back for a moment and express my appreciation for what is taking place here today. We at the University of Chicago Urban Education Institute and our partners at University of Chicago's Network for College Success are so fortunate to be able to convene people from nearly every corner of Chicago's education landscape. from the K-12 and higher education spaces, from the nonprofit, civic, and philanthropic communities. We are so fortunate to have the support from the philanthropic and civic communities that enables us to coalesce around and develop a shared and common understanding of the research pointing to what matters most for students' educational achievement and attainment, and the data illuminating the extent to which we are supporting all of our city's youth in attaining key milestones along their paths to and through college. But what we can't lose sight or sound of in the midst of all of the research and data that's at our disposal is our students' voices. They can tell us things that the research can't, and it can illuminate things sharply and audibly. They illuminate the whys behind the whats. They can reveal our blind spots, and they can ensure our common understanding of research and key data points don't come at the expense of a common understanding of our students' lived experiences. My hope is that today's event and the students' voices at today's event in particular spark new ideas, encourage new connections, and shed new light on new questions for us to explore as a community of educators and as education partners who care deeply about the educational trajectories of Chicago's youth and the young people across the country. With that, it is my pleasure and honor to invite some of our own Chicago Public School students and graduates to the stage. Ali Chavez, Jessica Vargas, and John West, along with John King, who will facilitate a discussion with them about the transitions, trials, and triumphs they've faced, along with their personal journeys to and through high school and college. Please join me in welcoming our students and John King to the stage, and thank you again all for being here today.
All right, hello everyone. So we're just going to dive right in. We've got John West here, who is a senior at University of Chicago Charter School and plans to study education as he heads off to college next year. We've got Jessica Vargas with us, who may be familiar to you. She has been featured in past To and Through panels at past convening. She went to Washington High School on Chicago's South Side and now is at the University of Chicago. And we have Ali Chavez. Ali went to Solorio Academy High School, studied at Harold Washington, and now is about to finish up this very semester at University of Illinois at Chicago. So I love student panels. There's a saying, nothing about us without us. This is the us. This is why we're all here, to hear from students. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's dive right in. John, you have done a lot of college visits over your time in high school and even in middle school. Can you talk about those college visits? Talk about how your schools have been, your high school has been supporting you around the transition to college.
So most recently, I just came back from visiting Pomona College in California, and I also went to visit Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. So with those, I applied to fly-in programs, which my school actually helped me apply to. My college counselor, Will Torres, was actually formerly an admissions rep from Pomona. So he helped me secure those positions in those schools, and at those schools I was able to determine what my match was with school, what fit was for me. So at Pomona, I was able to actually grasp what college would be like, what college stress would be like, and how they were able to juggle college stress. At Swarthmore, I wasn't as enthusiastic about the vibes that I was getting there, but Pomona was my life changer for liberal arts. I really liked the school, and it's actually made me consider early decision at Pomona. So going through all these schools like University of Illinois, Pomona, and University of Michigan, I was able to determine what school I want to go to, which is Pomona, and why I want to go to these schools based on the vibe that I have, based on the type of students, based on the cultural diversity. Going to schools like Northwestern and Swarthmore, they have these places like the Black House and the House, which were essentially their cultural centers for African Americans. At those places, I was able to be myself, and I felt like that's what I needed in a college. And I would never know how understand my culture and how that was implemented into college without these opportunities to go to these colleges.
Thank you. Allie, could you talk a little bit about the experience of navigating applying to college, going to college, the decision to transfer, financial aid? Just walk us through your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2014, and I was very involved in different programs there. At the moment, I had a lot of help navigating my options as an undocumented student in the U.S. I didn't understand a lot of it. I didn't understand that I wasn't eligible for financial aid or grants or any private loans or any things like that. So then I had a lot of help from my counselor and One Goal, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard from. I had a lot of help just navigating my options, the schools that I was able to attend at the time. And it was just the best decision to start at Herald, which was it's affordable, and then transfer to the four-year university. Yeah, the transition from even Harold Washington to UIC was rough. There was a lot of paperwork I didn't understand. There was a big gap in financials based on from CCC to UIC, and it was challenging. I mean, it was a lot of work. I think it was like a second job to do. But I think all the help that I got navigating my options really helped me get to where I am today.
Can you talk a little bit about financial aid in particular? Because you weren't able to access financial aid, what does that mean for how you are paying for college?
Not being eligible for financial aid means that I have no help in covering the financial costs of my education, which means I have to figure it out all on my own, like either from my parents, working, private scholarships, things like that just helps alleviate, but not really paid everything off without a huge help, right? So it's been hard. It's been tough being a dreamer here. So yeah, I mean, it's been a collaboration of a lot of sources to be able to get me through college.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Jessica,
Yes.
you dreamt about going to University of Chicago. Tell us about that, and then tell us about where that dream started, and then tell us about the transition from high school to University of Chicago.
So, as perhaps you all remember from last year, I did fall in love with the University of Chicago, and the reason why I was so particularly drawn to the University of Chicago is because I really love the city of Chicago. I grew up on the Southeast Side. I have very strong roots in the city, but I've also, because I've seen so much of the beauty of Chicago, I've also seen the not so pretty parts of Chicago. So the segregation, the cost of the economic disparity that comes from neighborhood to neighborhood. And I thought that the best way I can learn about the city and to really help my city was to continue my education in the city of Chicago. I personally did not hear, a lot of people from my high school don't necessarily go to the University of Chicago. I'm the first woman in my school to attend the University of Chicago, and keep in mind, my neighborhood high school has been open for quite a while now, so it makes you question of there are students who are talented who can attend the University of Chicago, but because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of opportunity, also cultural barriers, because in my culture, I'm Mexican, it's not commonly known that you leave the household. You only leave the household when you're married and when you want to have kids. So when it came to this whole transition of college, I think the hardest part of it was when I got my full scholarship. I had my acceptance to University of Chicago, and I went to tell my mom, Mom, I got my scholarship. I'm going to go to college. And she's like, you're leaving? And that's a significant different challenge that I had to face, because it wasn't a cultural norm to leave the household, much less for an education reason. But one of the hardest transition of going to University of Chicago was just the cultural difference. So Washington is very heavily segregated. It's 89% Latino. So when I went to Hyde Park, I didn't know how much diversity or what exactly that really looked like. But even at University of Chicago, it's not necessarily as diverse as it could be at all. So when I went there, it was a real shocker of oh, this is what it means sort of to be Latina. This is what it means to sort of be considered low income. This is what it's considered not to be the majority anymore. And I think that was one of the hardest parts, because one of the most challenges that I faced in university was, I remember I wrote this at a journal entry finishing my 2 quarters, was maintaining my GPA at University of Chicago has not been as rigorous as maintaining my mental state at the University of Chicago. And so I feel the best way to leverage is to if the university is going to uphold this passion for discourse, I feel it should also uphold this passion of securing that every child or every student from all diverse backgrounds are able to succeed equally there. Because I remember I was having a conversation during O Week. I remember meeting people in O Week. They're like, oh, but you're here now. The playing field is equal. And I'm like, not necessarily at all. Especially with my classes, I was able to I took the hardest classes I took. I took the hardest classes I could take at Washington, but even then I wasn't fully prepared. And that's not something I'm mad at my high school about. I love my high school with all my heart and joy. That's something I'm more upset of the system, or a bigger step to see the bigger sources, because my school should have gotten more resources allocated to it because it needed more, the sense of equity. But with that, I think I'll just share one more point, because I feel it was one of the most pivotal points that I had in University of Chicago. Was I remember doing my reading for sociology, and I was behind in almost nearly every of my classes, and I was struggling. And I remember thinking why am I behind? Why can't I catch up? Why does it always seem I'm playing this game of trying to keep up while still learning the new material? And I remember a dangerous thought came into mind, and it was, maybe I don't understand because these words in the reading weren't meant for a Mexican low-income girl on the South Side to understand. And that thought was dangerous, because it was sort of the cost of the segregation that I lived with, all the life of having to be resilient up to now. And the way I can best frame that, sorry I'm getting long-winded, but the point that made me change that, not a lot of people in University of Chicago have my story, but not a lot of people in Chicago have my story. So I should raise my hand and sit in the front of the class and make sure that I get my point across. So yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. Wow.
No problem.
John, I'm going to ask you a different question than the one we talked about beforehand, because I just want to build on a point that Jessica made. One of the things that I know we've talked about throughout the day here is African-American, Latino men, underrepresented, and who graduates, who goes on to college, who succeeds in college. For you, what are the reasons that you see this college path? What has made the difference for you? What important voices have been a part of your life to help you see this path towards college?
So one of the most important people, some of the most important people are kind of people that I've met throughout my educational life. So I'm a part of the academy group, and also my actual University of Chicago Charter School counselors are kind of the important people that are helping me through my college process. It's being able to see a bunch of African-American teachers in my school, because my school is literally 99% African-American, being able to see them and see them work and actually see them passionate about something they're doing is kind of inspiring for me. Being able to have counselors that look like me actually help me get through my college process. People who actually understand the game has probably been one of the most important parts when it comes to my college process. So seeing other African-Americans like myself is probably the most influential part.
Thank you. Thanks. Allie, I want to go back to your point about the sort of financial aid challenge. Yeah. We talked earlier about your decision to switch from being pre-med.
Yeah.
and how that was connected to the financial aid issue. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I started college, I really wanted to be a pediatrician. And I started as a pre-med, and I did 3 years of pre-medical studies. But then when I had like a realization moment where it was either I go out and pursue a career in the medical field, which is very expensive and very long, or I kind of like switch my options into business, which I am involved now. And I realized that I couldn't afford to go to medical school. If I could barely afford to go to college, I wasn't going to be able to afford going to medical school. So I decided to change my career path for that same reason, just because things are so intense right now with even the political climate that we live in right now. And it's just, I think at the time it had to be a very mature and kind of challenging decision to take, but it's done and I'm almost graduating, so yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how you're balancing work and school now, and what your kind of career plan is now.
Yeah, so balancing a full-time job and a full-time school schedule is tough. Like, I've had very long days where I wake up at 5 a.m., I get ready for work, and then I have to go after work after 5, I have to go to school. So luckily I'm in a university that offers late classes, and that has helped a lot. But it's challenging, right? Like sometimes my brain is just so tired, I can't think. And then after I go home after a long day, I have a full load of homework to do. So it's very challenging. Time management, even getting sick like in the winter, it's very challenging because if I don't go to class, I get behind. If I don't go to work, I don't have money to pay for school. So it's kind of like a domino effect, and it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging to kind of just manage the whole work and school full time.
And your plan going forward?
Yes, so I plan to go forward. Right now I am thinking of getting my MBA, and the dream is to become a CEO now. So yeah, I mean, I've been influenced to do this, but I think it's a good career option, but I wish that I could have stuck to my original goals and dreams than either to have to kind of like direct to a different path just because of the situation that I was born in.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask each of you to share a piece of advice that you've gotten from a teacher, a mentor, family member that's been really important to your educational journey. Why don't we start with you, Jessica, and we'll come down this way.
I think mine comes from a quote I heard it was from Chicago Scholars, which is a not-for-profit that focused on low-income first-generation students who succeed. And it was a student speaker, and he said a quote that struck me, and even to this day. He said, "We have overcome so many obstacles, so many cultural obstacles, economic, cultural, social obstacles, to let self-doubt be another one." So that was like the best advice I've gotten.
So me, I've had probably 2 pieces of advices from both the academic group and my school to get me to kind of slow down and relax and respect both my college process, because I'm kind of the type of person that does a lot and actually does a little too much. So the 2 pieces of advice is that you can do anything, but you can't do everything, and that I need to work smarter instead of harder. So to me, that essentially was their way of telling me to slow down and make sure I prioritize and do the stuff that I need to get done, like my college process.
To me, I think the biggest word of advice I've gotten is, and this actually came from my PD from Wongo, and she told me when I was applying to college that everyone goes through it differently. Like, everyone has their own route to their dreams, and I think that having those words really helped, because my path was differently than the traditional college students. So I think knowing that I was different and I was going to have a different path than everyone else helped me keep going. Like, it didn't discourage me. It helped me not discourage myself too. Just because I'm not going through the traditional pathway doesn't mean that I'm not going to get there.
Great.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to add one more because I saw Jakina over there. I have to give you a shout out. But one thing that she really said that really stayed to me to this point was, you aren't lucky to go to the university. The university is lucky to have you. That was a good quote.
They are. Right? Imagine that the presidents of your respective universities, including Pomona, were here in the audience. I want to know what you would tell them. So maybe we'll start with you, Allie. What would you tell the president of the University of Illinois in Chicago about what the university could do to support you, to help you be successful and your peers be successful?
I would tell this person, specifically me, I would tell him to fight for what's right, to fight to open the funds to every student, not just the U.S. citizens, right? I would tell them to do what's right, right? If we are admitted into the university, I think we should be able to to have a fair chance to fight for the same funds, and that's not happening right now. So I think just by fighting for this, he or she will set the good example of we're all equal, right? Like we all should have the same opportunities, not just in the institution, but in the U.S. or in the world alone.
Great, thank you. John, what would you want the Pomona president to know about what's going to make Pomona a good place for you?
My thing would probably for the president of Pomona to need to know that the school of Pomona needs to get connected with the urban communities and the schools within them. They need to better advocate, better go into the actual schools and make sure they recruit people, because some people that deserve to go to those schools just don't know about them. And that's the same with other liberal arts schools. They just don't know the good that's in them, and that's pretty much the big thing.
Yeah, great. Jessica?
I think I'd like to say to ensure that University of Chicago is a space, not just to open up the space for everyone in the city and the Chicago. So make it a welcoming space for every student, including the low income, including all your Odyssey scholars, including every student there, by having establishment spaces for us. So culture centers is one advocate that I would advocate for, and also ensuring that there is interaction, positive interaction with the outside neighborhoods, because that's one thing I noticed a lot in the University of Chicago is that it tends to be a very bubble, very isolated resources to the outside neighborhoods, and I feel like the university has to improve and readdress its relationship with the neighborhoods and the other Southside residents.
Great. Let's see. All right. Let's talk a little bit about financial aid, and Allie talked a little bit about the challenges that she faced. Jessica, how do you think about paying for University of Chicago, which I understand is somewhat expensive? How do you think about that? What does that mean for the choices that you make now as a student?
I think financial aid was the biggest barrier when it came to college. It was and I remember the advice that I got. He was in admissions, I think I'm forgetting the name of the college, but he emphasized a lot of the essays. He was like, you were literally typing up money with those essays. The value of essays, you're portraying yourself in an essay, and that was really hard to do. Especially me, my first language is Spanish, so when it came to writing, I tend to write in passive voice, and there was a lot of logistics that I really had to fine tune. But a lot of it came from finding these scholarships, because there was no way I was going to be able to go to school without scholarships. And I was lucky to be eligible for FastForward, for MAPS, but it should be, like you mentioned, for everyone to have these opportunities, because it's important the way I see it is that these are doors, but if you don't even have a way to open the door, to unlock the door, there's no way that you can get in. So that's the best way.
John?
So,
How are you thinking about the financial aid process? We talked a little bit about the FAFSA already.
So coming from a low middle class family, financial aid is still something that I'm looking at. My parents can't really afford to pay for college fully, especially Pomona, who has which full price is around like $70,000. My parents can't really pay for that, so I'm just thinking about like how I'm gonna navigate what scholarships I need to apply for. I'm a posse semi-finalist, so I'm working to see at Pomona how that will work along with my parents' estimated family contribution. Will they necessarily stack my financial aid, or will my parents still end up having to pay a large amount of money? So, yeah.
Let me turn to another question, and when we're running out of time, but I could talk to you guys all day. There are a lot of folks in this room who work with ninth graders. What would you want them to tell ninth graders about high school, about the transition to college, about their own planning? Why don't we start with you, Allie, and we'll go that.
I want them to tell them the truth early on, you know. It's when you're a minority, when you're a person of color, that route is not easy. And I think if we prepare students early on, they have a better visualization of like what that's gonna look like for them. And I want them to give them hope, right? To like make them believe that even though it's going to be challenging, it's possible. There's many students have done it and they can do it too.
Great.
Yeah.
John?
So at my school, not many of the freshmen understand the importance that freshman year really holds. So they don't really take stuff like GPA, college visits, and stuff serious. So I guess for the ninth grade teachers, if you could like instill the importance of the stuff that they do every day and how important freshman year how important it is to have a good fresh start. A good start is important, and also make sure you're behind them, make sure they understand, make sure they understand what college means, because not many freshmen are really thinking about college because they're fresh out of 8th grade. So they aren't really worried about their futures as much, but they need to understand the importance that the freshman year will have on their overall success.
I think for me, I would also emphasize this idea that to the best of your ability, give them the confidence that they would need to like go overcome like the college like journey, because like it's challenging, it's hard once you're out there at institute, like not just applying, but once being there, it's hard because trying to keep going, the motivation, the fear of failing, walking on this like tightrope in which like there's no safety net in the bottom. So what I would give my piece of advice is to believe in them, but truly believe in them. Like the resilient, like students were very sensitive into like knowing whether you invest in us or whether you believe in us to achieve the stars and the moon and more. But there's a term in psychology called resilient children. And these resilient children, it's a term used for students who make it out of like difficult backgrounds. And what they often all have is an adult who believes in them, who advocates for them, who's willing to push them to go farther. And so that's a lot of what I had at Washington. I had plenty of teachers who believed in me and my ability to succeed, and that's how I am. That's where I am today, through them.
That's great. That's a powerful note to end on. Please join me in thanking this amazing panel.